Jason, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, no knowledge and 10 being kind of all knowing, based on your conversation with employers, how would you rate their general level of knowledge on how to select and monitor service providers?
Well, it's difficult to generalize because a lot of it's driven by resources, right? Resources and expertise and experience. So typically, smaller plan sponsors don't have the same internal resources. The larger plan would, in terms of the dedicated personnel that may have been hired to run the benefit plans or certain aspects of benefit plans in very large companies. And those smaller plan sponsors, I would say they sort of hover between 1 to 5, right? If they have a good consultant, good advisor that's helping them understand the due diligence and so forth, the different options available to them so they can make a meaningful comparison. Whereas service providers, sort of large and small plans, I would say they sort of, well, the larger plans are better, but they're still, I meet very few that are in that 10 or 9 category. And just contrast that with investment selection, I think, we can see 9s or 10s across the board. Small plan sponsors typically have somebody there to explain. I mean, we're talking about 401k plans, so at the end of the day, what are we talking about? 10, 15 plain vanilla asset classes. So they get very comfortable with that. It's the service providers that across the boards, they tend to struggle.
In part 1 of our podcast interview, you made, I think, a great point that, in your opinion, 90% of the risk that plan sponsors incur really comes from selecting and monitoring service providers. Why is that such a high risk, and why is that so important for plan sponsors to have this as part of their fiduciary governance process?
Well, from litigation, I would say litigation, about 90%, just roughly, of what we've seen in the last 5-6 years, I would say is attributed to or could have been satisfied by a prudent process, a very well-informed decision-making around service providers. So that's accurate. As far as risk generally, though, if we're talking about regulatory enforcement, DOL or IRS, it's still on the high end, but 90 would be a stretch. I think there you're probably looking at something like maybe 60% of the risk in the service provider bucket, 30 in the administration and reporting, and then 10 in the investments, again, because you don't see regulators scrutinizing investment menus to see how the alpha is of the fund. They're going to look more at share class and